Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Driven Wild. Today, we are exposing the Uber CEO like everyone else is these days with Uber CEO admits it can make any model work after years of denying employment. I don't know what this accent is, don't ask. But out of all seriousness, I thought that this was an interesting development, and I kind of knew this. You guys are paying a lot of money for us to stay as gig workers because this proves that they can actually do it. They admitted it. I would like to hear his side of the story because I don't believe in just hating on somebody simply because they haven't been doing something they said they couldn't afford to do. Because let's be honest, none of these companies can really afford to do this, but they haven't even made a profit in a lot of these cases yet. Without further ado, I'd like to hear what Uber's got to say. I'd like to go over how it actually is for us as gig workers and everything in between. So without further ado, let's get started. After years of insisting that gig workers cannot, under any circumstances, become employees, Uber CEO Dara has finally admitted that the company could make any employment model work. Just because they can do it doesn't mean we want that as gig workers. Like I said, 50% of us gig workers are entrepreneurs. And those of us that aren't yet are looking to be entrepreneurs in the future. It's just a fact. Dara made the comments in a December virtual fireside chat with a UBS analyst. Video of the meeting was obtained and reported on by Li Fang, who points out in the article for The Intercept that the rhetoric falls flat when compared to what's going on in the physical world. The core of the video centers around the questions raised by European Union's December proposal for a widely popular set of strict rules that would reclassify millions of gig workers as employees. This would be a shot to the heart of the gig economy, which for a decade now has relied on weaponizing weaknesses in labor laws to exploit workers by minimizing their labor costs with sub-minimum wages while maximizing their workload through algorithmic overseers. The way this person writes this is already literally out to attack the gig economy, weaponizing weaknesses in labor laws, and exploit workers by minimizing labor costs with sub-minimum wages. In order for us to have a minimum wage, we would have to be employees, and that's something a lot of us don't want. If they were going to maximize our workload through algorithmic overseers, my phone would be going off like crazy right now. So I think that there is a lot of misconception to what this person is saying. We can make any model work. We really can, because our marketplace is incredibly flexible. There's a lot of demand for our technology, our service, our brand, our safety, our reliability, Dara said. So any model can work economically for us. This is about what drivers want and what couriers want, and they want flexibility. So we would very much prefer it because they prefer it. This contradicts the earlier assertions by Dara ahead of California's vote on Prop 22. The ballot measure his company successfully introduced to carve out labor law exemptions for its workers. Dara wrote a blog post insisting that out of Uber's 1.2 million pre-COVID workforce, about 926,000 drivers would no longer be able to work on Uber going forward. This doesn't sound like making any model work. Okay, so they're trying to take what he said completely out of context. A lot of us gig workers want to stay as gig workers. Are there gig workers that prefer to be employees? Yes! Absolutely. So therefore, if there is a version of Uber that is an employee model, go on, take it. However, a lot of us want the flexibility to be able to just say, hey, I don't want to go in today. Hey, I have to work on my business today. Hey, I need to turn off for a little bit. I'll come back a little later. Hey, that's our decision. Why is it suddenly so difficult to understand we actually want as gig workers? It doesn't sound like Vice actually cares about the gig economy. Despite his admission that Uber can make an employment scheme work, Dara downplayed the EU proposal in the UBS call and insisted Uber's preferred model would eventually win. This is the beginning of essentially a process where the EU consults with its states And there is a ton of dialogue, and we've already had dialogue with the EU before anything is finalized, and these regulations are usually finalized on a state-by-state level, Dara said. Here in America, everything is divided from federal law to state law, county law. In the EU, it's probably on a totally different legal system. We are championing the IC Plus model, Dara said, referencing the lobbying campaign seeking to codify permanent exemptions from labor laws in order to suit Uber's business model. I think that model in the end is going to win. I think that the dialogue with regulators will make that apparent on the ground, and this is a long process, a multi-year process where on the ground you talk to regulators. There's a lot of talk lately about turning us into employees. While I don't necessarily disagree with the point of, like, it's something we need to be aware of, I think it's also important to note that it could still be years before we actually end up as employees with how our legal system works. So keep that in mind. Uber's process up to now, however, has not been merely dialogue with regulators. In the past few years, it has consistently threatened to leave regions poised to regulate it or fight long battles in court to overthrow labor laws. Not to totally defend Uber here. Like, I like Uber Eats as a platform. I like the Uber driver platform overall. But if I'm getting a lot of backlash for just trying to provide a service and you guys are making it that much harder for us to function, why wouldn't we just leave? Like, they're trying to fulfill a demand. They're not trying to be jerkish about it. The way he wrote is like, you're being jerkish about it. But if it's not possible to press and play the actual business model into that area, and it's gonna be like trying to shove a square into a circle, it doesn't make sense. In 2020, Uber threatened to suspend services in California if it didn't get its way on the Prop 22 ballot, crafted to carve out an exemption from the California state law requiring gig workers to be reclassified as employees. At the same time, it was filing appeals challenging the state law in case its court ballot failed. In Britain, Uber fighting to extend its temporary license to operate in London and a court-ordered reclassification through appeals for years. In 2022, the day after Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro signed into bills that made it mandatory for app-based companies to provide accident insurance for drivers, provide PPE, and provide financial assistance. Uber announced it would suspend its delivery service in Brazil by March. I feel a strong sense of entitlement from this particular writer. California, Britain, and Brazil contain Uber's largest markets and provide significant revenues. A willingness to suspend services or fight long legal battles against reclassification in them suggests that Uber cannot make any business model work. In fact, Uber claimed in its IPO documents that its business would be adversely affected if drivers were classified as employees instead of independent contractors. Yeah, a lot of us independent contractors would just leave because the product that was promised to us is changing in a way where it's intolerable. Can they make any business model work? I'm sure, but there will be a lot of churning happening. Independent contractors would leave, employees would come in, and things that made sense before aren't going to make sense now. If it's not going to work for us, we shouldn't be giving you the service. Need I remind you, it's a luxury service. There are a few ways to read this. One way is that Uber had a change of heart and realized that it can afford to allow gig workers some of their basic rights. Another is that Uber is desperate and eager to say anything to keep investor confidence up amid increased regulatory pressure. The reality is most likely somewhere in between. That can be very true. And while I don't necessarily agree that they were trying to just say anything to keep investor confidence up, I do think that Dara is trying to champion the concept of gig workers staying gig workers. Basic rights. What basic rights are we not being permitted? Insurances and other benefits. A lot of people are willing to just give those things up to just start other things. Like, you would be surprised how many people have, like, during the Great Resignation, have just quit because they requested to work from home. They were even willing to give up their benefits and everything else that these people are crying to say we actually would want, but we actually don't give a rip about. And then those employers were like, no. So they left. In a chat with UBS, Dara points to Spain, which in May ratified a law that reclassified delivery couriers as employees, and where Uber works with fleet partners who employ couriers, not unlike Amazon's delivery company model, which contracts small firms to employ couriers. Dara maintains that even with Spain, we're proven that a fleet employment model works, and it not only works, it grows, and it grows at margins that are close to our long-term margins. So it sounds to me like they tried it in another country and it worked. However, that doesn't mean that should happen across the board. More than a decade into its existence, however, no model has managed to provide consistent profits for Uber. After all, the company has racked up over $30 billion in losses. In December, the company sold off the last of its moonshot projects that for a decade were held up by former CEO Travis Kalanick and current executive Dara as the future of the company. In this UBS chat, Dara admitted it was looking to selling off its stake in Didi, which in the past provided a juicy on-paper profit that boosted its profitability estimates, but is currently dragging Uber finances in the midst of China's regulatory crackdown on tech. So the Uber tried to expand into a market that didn't quite work out. That's normal. For years, we've been advocating that workers on our platform deserve flexibility and more benefits. We're glad Vice has finally taken notice. Our message has been simple and consistent. We should listen to drivers. Poll after poll shows that drivers overwhelmingly prefer to remain independent contractors because it allows them to work wherever, whenever, and on any platform they want, Uber spokesperson Noah Edwardson told Motherboard. In Europe, Accenture, Good Work, Oxford Economics, and the latest studies from Copenhagen Economics, based on a survey of 16K European couriers, as well as Compass Lexicon, also made it clear the number one reason people chose platform work is for the flexibility to earn money while balancing other commitments, and that they would prefer to remain independent. They continued. This is why we believe the best answer is to provide new benefits while ensuring drivers and couriers to keep the flexibility they value. This is why, of course, Uber instituted a quota system in New York City that was so flexible drivers had to sleep in their cars to meet it, or why Uber consistently hikes fares and cuts driver pay despite constant strikes and labor actions. Uber has been committed to flexibility and independence for itself. This is my opinion. It's worth what you pay for it. None of you pay me. There you go. I think that Vice was literally out to get Uber with this particular article. If you think that we're going to be treated better as employees, we're not. I have worked in a lot of different industries, and then I worked in food delivery. Can they make the employment model work? Yes. Should they make the employment model work? No. Keep gig work as gig work. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. As always, make sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.